the media is frequently under attack for reporting on certain things.
Although the investigation is still ongoing,
There should be a more concerted, unified front.
Tropical Storm Cynthia.
Fighting water to making room for water.
hello everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Headlines, the go-to space for the top stories that made the headlines and more. I'm Amalina, Kamal.
And I'm Elena, Koshy.
Now we begin today's discussion with a disturbing incident that has shaken the local press community. Veteran sports journalist Haresh Deol was reportedly assaulted and attacked in Bangsar recently. Now this is indeed a shocking act of violence that raises questions about journalist safety, press freedom, and the risks media practitioners face while simply doing their jobs.
Absolutely. So when something like this happens, it isn't just about just one journalist. It shines a light on the larger issue of safety and media practitioners and what it really means to safeguard press freedom in Malaysia. Media groups have come out strongly expressing concern, and rightly so, because when journalists are intimidated or harmed, it affects the public's right to credible, independent information. Yeah.
And today, we're not just talking about the incident that took place, right? But asking a bigger question: how protected are journalists entirely in the Malaysia and in the region, and what mechanisms already exist, and what needs to change?
Exactly. And we have a guest today who can help us unpack all of this. So we are joined by Cynthia Loraine, Media Program Officer at the Centre for Independent Journalism, CIJ. So thank you so much for being with us. So
Thank you for having me.
let's get into it.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you're here today for such a disturbing sort of like, I suppose, a juncture here, especially as a media practitioner. And I am very sad to actually report that the assault, unfortunately, with the recent police statement that was put out, is being at least defined as a personal isolated case, right? But CIJ has indeed described the incident as being premeditated or allegedly being premeditated in that sense. But how serious could this be? And how, in some instance, how would it affect others when they go out and about having to do their job?
I need to be very clear on our position. It's because we don't have that kind of insight into the investigations, which is actually why we also call for transparent investigations. I mean, if they want to say it's a personal, it's done for personal reasons. I know there are a lot of narratives out there right now. The thing is, unfortunately, we cannot be sure right now. But regardless, if it was indeed, personal, or if it was indeed premeditated, I think that's really, really very concerning. So while we are waiting for investigations to be done, hopefully, very transparently and with integrity, we want to make sure that everyone knows that, not just us, I don't think it's just CIJ. I think you've seen reports from other, news organizations or even CSOs for news. Garam has also been very outspoken about this. Our eyes are on them and we want to know what's going on as well. But if it was indeed a premeditated attack, then of course this is atrocious. This is really a very, very concerning development in the media space as well.
When the official narrative is indeed in such a way, I mean, to be fair, the investigation is still running. It hasn't concluded yet, but the initial findings, they have stated to say ada hal peribadi in that sense. But does it actually discourage journalists from reporting threats in the future?
Even if it's hal peribadi or not, you kind of know that your fellow journalist is out there and your fellow journalist has been attacked. And regardless of what anyone says, there is an existing narrative, that this was premeditated and this was done. So, I mean, regardless, I think journalists have long been victims of crackdowns. Physical violence is one thing, but I mean, the pre-existing space right now is, it just shows that journalists are very vulnerable out in the field. And we should be doing more to protect them. Not just physically, but also legally, I think.
You were talking about, legal intimidation, so to speak, right? So threats against journalists today aren't only physical,
Yes,
like what
correct.
happened recently, but they also include online harassment, coordinated abuse, stalking, and lots of things. I mean,
Yes.
how well prepared do you think journalists and media organizations are to handle these evolving issues?
To begin with, I mean,
Yeah.
To begin with, I think they're as prepared as they can be, which is both a fortunate statement in the sense that I think they are quite aware of the potential legal crackdowns in terms of protecting themselves. But with that comes a lot of self-censorship. The unfortunate thing is that really how, especially for smaller news organizations or independent news organizations, as it is, all media, I think, is under this kind of crisis where financial sustainability is being called into question. It's not just a Malaysian thing, it's all over the
Globally,
world.
yeah.
Globally,
Yes.
I do
but
agree.
Southeast Asia especially is very underfunded in this sense, right? So you want to, I mean, if the point of crackdowns like this, which we actually identify as SLAPP, as LAPP, which is strategic litigations against public participation. This involves that kind of example, right? The media is frequently under attack for reporting on certain things. So this is a tactic that's been used. Nowadays, I think what we've recorded as CIG in our monitoring work is there's a lot of questioning being conducted. There's a lot of investigations. We have the Communications and Multimedia Act, the Printing Presses of Publications Act, which is another beast to be bested. But it's kind of the same tools being used in more creative ways as time goes on.
Right. But
Right.
I suppose just being the devil's advocate here.
Yeah, for sure.
The one who is trying to at least intellectualize it would probably fall back on the reasoning of having to ensure that misinformation do not spread. So how do we tackle this sort of argument? Or at least how does CIJ tackles this sort of argument?
Yeah, we completely understand. And in fact, our work does involve tackling misinformation, disinformation, hate speech. But there's a degree to all of this. There is a proportionality test and also a harm test. I mean, it does happen, but how often do news organizations, do journalists who know the protocols, who know the procedure, you all do your fact checking, I would imagine. How often does this, I mean, is it really misinformation if you're reporting on something legitimate, which you can back up with facts and you've backed it up with your own, protocols, your
Yes.
procedures, you have the evidence.
Yeah.
So this isn't really, I mean, it's not really justifiable, is it, if you want to go after them for misinformation? It's a question of who gets targeted as well. Do you really go after political actors? Do you really go after influencers who speak, maybe even spread misinformation or disinformation, especially, during the elections period, they'll say whatever about anyone, right? Everyone takes sides or something. But, do we really go after the people who are spreading misinformation just about the right people? No, right? You kind of look for who opposes your agenda at the given time.
But in this landscape, because with all these things circulating around, journalists often feel threatened or unsafe when it comes to doing their job, which
Right.
is actually, giving information, in the act of actually giving information
Yes, exactly.
to the public. So what are some of the practical support systems or guidelines does CIJ currently offer to journalists?
I mean, we graduate with
Yeah.
understanding the ethics of journalism.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
But we live in the real world as well, because we do understand that probably to some
Correct.
extent there are individuals who slip through the cracks, right? But
Yes.
but CIJ is also there to ensure that, hey, we want freedom of the press, but we have to ensure that we ourselves
Are being held
part
accountable.
of the fraternity
Yes.
to be
To- it's
upholding
like a-
certain standards.
It's like a check and guide thing, I mean,
Yes.
quite obviously, there should be some guidelines.
I mean, on a personal, like a CIJ angle, from our angle, we have formulated some guidelines with some other CSOs on suicide reporting, ethical reporting on suicide. But actually, I think whom we should be looking at would be the Media Council. So they were just formed this year, and I think it's worth staying tuned because the Media Council was set up to establish, a code of conduct for journalists. And the point of the Media Council, we are hoping, is to be independent of, the government, of MCMC. This is basically, the concept is by the media, for the media, because you are mentioning very valid points, right? We're not pointing fingers here. I think what we have to do is to understand where everyone comes from, because these are, the enemy is not each other. We have an environment to tackle, and it's very, very difficult. And the big question is, again, your financial sustainability and who falls victim to all of that. We have so many layoffs that also threatens media freedom here.
Right. I do want to understand. I understand we are talking about this, but commitments that we have, voiced out,
right,
or at least write on paper, must actually be reflected through practice, I believe.
Exactly.
But
absolutely.
And in this particular situation, we are brought here today to discuss about a particular breach that has happened.
Yes.
Although the investigation is still ongoing, but a breach has happened only because the journalist in question has 25 years of being in the industry, or at least a quarter of the century of being in the field, and he has also come up with stories that are very, how do I say this?
Hard-hitting.
Yes.
Hard-hitting.
Yes.
But
Yes.
being politically correct, right?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So with that sort of understanding, and then to see this sort of situation from happening, it does. It does instill fear.
It was in broad daylight. Seriously,
in Bangsar of all places.
Blatant, how blatant can it be, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely we're here because of this issue, and it's very important. It's very important, first and foremost, the fact that we are talking about it, the fact that we are letting the authorities know that we are watching them. We cannot let this slip through the cracks, right? So that is the first thing we should do. But I'm going to challenge everyone to kind of step out of this and also ask questions about other journalists. Yes, people who are victims of, investigations and crackdowns, but I also want to ask about, remember there was a journalist in the Sungai Bakap by-elections?
Okay.
She was harassed. What happens when a journalist is sexually harassed? And it's not just, we have to look at all the stakeholders involved. What are the protections? You want to talk about, protections and practical, steps. It begins with, yes, holding the government accountable, holding the authorities, not just the authorities. We want to look at technocrats. We want to look at people who are, the subjects of these hard-hitting stories. And we want to create an environment where the newsrooms are setting standards and making sure that everyone is well protected as well in the course of their jobs. Yeah. So yeah.
No, I do agree. And then I just want to also maybe clarify, because I do agree we want to hold the authorities or at least the government accountable, but that sort of statement might be misconstrued
as them being
of
course
responsible
not.
For it. No,
of course not.
Yeah, actually,
just in general, if anyone.
It's how you respond to threats and violence. We just want to see justice being served.
100%. Yeah.
Because,
which is why we should talk about this, and we need to keep our eyes on what's going on. We need to highlight every issue that is gonna come up that's gonna affect any journalist, especially when it's their safety.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned the Sungai Bakap incident, because I think that was in 2024.
Yes, correct.
And the thing was, at the end of the day, it was just classified as no further action.
Exactly.
So we don't want that, because she did lodge a report. They did arrest the person in question, and then after that it was just
NFA.
No further action.
Yes.
So it says something about safety. It actually talks about how, when we go and do our jobs as journalists, and the role of the journalist is, of course, to disseminate information. That's the role. And
we're the watchdog, in a sense.
We are doing a great disservice to the nation when we are forced to self-censor or feel unsafe and therefore, step away from that arena because, things like this happen.
To pull on that thread, I think we could also start it with, whoever, there will be, especially in incidents like this, there will be multiple parties who are responsible for this. And it's not just like you caused this issue or anything, but you are responsible for taking care of the people, your fourth pillar of democracy.
Yes.
So I could say as the as a CSO for media freedom, like our job is to make sure whoever should be held accountable is held accountable. But I would say that it's the public as well. It's the people who read the news, who respond to it. In, let's say, sexual harassment cases especially, these survivors are subject to, after the event, after it's being reported, often you see a lot of online gender-based violence. And it's inflicted by, actors who are not necessarily the media. It really comes from anyone. But again, I think also as the media, it is the responsibility of the media to kind of just make sure the reporting is balanced, is fair. I'm sure you all know, so I'm really preaching to the choir right now. So you know how to do your jobs way better than I could ever tell you.
To be fair, if we look at it in a balanced view, or objective view, I mean, the government has also iterated that it will support a free and responsible press, right? But we want to also see it in practice, meaning ensuring our safe environments and ensuring that our work actually gets delivered accurately and transparently.
Exactly.
I think when it comes to ethics, it falls on across all stakeholders.
100%,
right?
100%.
But again, like I just want to understand, like moving ahead, what areas or what gaps should we close immediately?
It is a question we're all answering because honestly, again, the safety of journalists has been called into question for the longest time. If we knew the fix, we would have done it yesterday, which is, it's not a happy thing to say, but really on this account, I think we need to create a culture, all of us, like you said, all stakeholders involved, we need to create a culture where it's not even a question, you shouldn't be doing something like this. So how this proceeds, how this case proceeds, how any case proceeds, again, like you said, the NFA issue, right? Like that's a very good or bad example of how you handle this kind of case and how seriously we are taking this, like any form of violence against journalists. Not only this, I would say, layoffs of journalists, what happens then? How is that being held how are they being held accountable? We can call them out, and that is very important. And I think this is the role that we really need to play right now, because we are the public, we are the consumers of media, we are also the democracy, right? And the media, it's kind of, we have to support each other. So you play this role of giving the public access to fair information. And we, in turn, have to support this level of transparency. So we need to demand for that. We need to demand for accountability. First and foremost, if you want to talk about very immediate action, we need to really, really make sure that it's being known, which is actually what you're doing right now. But we need to make it very clear that we are watching them. And we're not going to let this slide.
Right. Again, it's still premature for us to dictate or say anything, right? But we are watching. Yes, indeed.
Yes, we are watching.
But whatever we've just discussed is the external sort of factors to ensure transparency and trust, right? But what can we do internally? Internally, what sort of standards do newsrooms need to hold into practice to ensure that this is also driven within the ecosystem?
I'm sure every newsroom, especially, bigger newsrooms, they have the policies in place. I would hope they have the policies in place. Something basic like, what are your policies to protect your women journalists? What are your policies to protect, especially when someone is working on a high profile case or a case that is definitely going to put a target on their back? What then are you putting in place? What are the protective measures that are being put in place? Granted, we understand that, again, there is the concept of understaffing, again, financial sustainability is an issue, and this, maybe funding might be an issue, but then again, what are your priorities? Because really, the safety of your journalists, on the ground is of utmost importance.
You know, the role of a journalist, I mean, of course, to disseminate information and to be out there to report what is out there, and often at the risk of their own safety.
Yes.
So what role should government, law enforcement, regulators, you know, civil society, and even the public play in ensuring that journalists can work safely and without intimidation? I mean, it's easy to say that, oh, we all should need to play a role, but when should this start? When should this shift start to happen?
We should have started
Like
10,000 years ago. Yes, correct. We
started it out that way, though. We started it out that way. With no. I mean, we started out that way. To be fair, media in Malaysia started out to be flushing out our colonial masters, right?
Betul
tak?
Betul.
Back in the days,
Yeah, that's right. Back in the time,
and then ops lalang happened, you know. So
but then, you know, things happen. Life happens.
Yeah. I think maybe we need to stop. We need to hold our government of the day accountable. Any government of any day,
Any administration
for sure. And I mean, from the CSO lens, I think, we are always in conversation. We're not just talking about it. I think it's very important to use our networks because we are speaking to different actors, different people, even the government. We have different resources. So we really need to figure out a way to kind of come together. We needed to have figured out that way maybe 20 years ago, like you said. But we really need to kind of stop looking for our own interests. All our work, especially the work of journalists, is for public interest, is for the public good. We need to stop looking at each other like, oh, it should have been you. You should have done that. We need to ask ourselves the question, which is valid. You're asking the question right now. And I could go into each stakeholder. I think the policies that are in place, we really need to pay attention to this because it's quite alarming. They're going to amend the Printing Presses and Publication Act, or at least there were talks of the PPPA being amended. So one of the amendments is to reinstate one of the proposed amendments, is to reinstate licensing for journalists to be renewed every 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can imagine the crackdowns that could happen from that. As it is, we have like a whole case study on how broadly the PPPA has been interpreted, how broadly the Communications and Multimedia Act has been interpreted, because now you're digital, right? You can't not be, available online, right? All your news. So that extends the scope and the power for the authorities to crack down on all of us. So I think in the first place, stop with that, especially if it's going to expose any wrongdoing of any powerful actor. Then I think we need to stop being quiet about it, being complacent about it.
I think the whole sort of like messaging here is that when you start to silence the press, then it will trickle to other areas of jurisdiction, right?
Exactly.
That are other bodies of authority that's supposed to hold or supposed to drive justice. That's supposed to be the check and balance, right?
Exactly.
So you don't want that to happen. You don't want us to turn into suddenly, an environment where everything's very strictly feudal.
Exactly.
I mean, when we silence or censor journalists, we don't just stifle, a profession. We do a disservice to the nation. An uninformed society cannot make informed choices.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, one other thing. I mean, it's very basic, but I think just safety trainings for everyone.
Yes.
Oh, don't worry. I'm safety training in that sense, like martial arts?
No. I mean, whoa.
Yeah, no. I mean,
if every journalist knows kung fu.
So, yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Talk about it.
I mean, I think it's safety, legal safety, digital safety. I mean, you actually would be surprised how many people are willing to invest in digital safety, and you would be shocked to know how quickly someone could hack into your basic, work laptops or your passwords. I mean, I know this sounds so basic because we hear about it all the time, but it's important.
But it happens.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
Yeah, what I'm trying to say is that if you think that it's not happening, then oh my God, are you living under a rock?
For sure.
Like, things are happening fast. Hackers can hack you anytime,
Yeah, and also some level of monitoring. I know it sounds really like what are you going to do with your numbers if, it's not being addressed immediately correct. I think monitoring, but also addressing things as they come, takedowns. Unfortunately, I mean, I know journalists are victims of this, but I think journalists are also the best people to start reporting on, hey, this is actually happening to us.
I also think that all media platforms, right? I mean, there should be a more concerted, unified front.
Oh, yeah.
Because of course in this landscape, of course, we're all competing for the same thing. We're all wanting, but at the same time, when things like this happens, there must be a united front.
As much as it is a tragedy, and we really, really hope that this never, never happens again. But one thing I can appreciate about the media fraternity is that often, you are quite, ready to stick up for each other. And I think you rarely find that in many professions. I think this is very good. This is very important to continue. You're right.
At least if CIJ is able to highlight one good thing that
the
they are
government
doing
has done
and should continue, what would it be?
I will appreciate for sure, I think, the establishment of the Media Council. I think having the Media Council is definitely the government keeping their promise to kind of make sure that the media is independently regulated. So it's by the media, for the media. So, really, I do have to appreciate that is happening. And we hope that it continues to be independent. It continues to, fight for media freedom. I think it's really, really good to separate that from the government. And I think we should have more of this. I think definitely there is a time and a place where really we have to work in concert with each other. And this recognition of, hey, actually the media has the power to do this and has the even the sway to kind of speak to their own fellow media practitioners and to say, hey, let's set up our own standards and to give that kind of trust. It's not even trust. I mean, it is trust. It's warranted trust because you can do it. So I think that's a very, very important step, which actually we should keep an eye on as well. In a positive way, I think we should keep supporting the council because this was a really, really good initiative. We will appreciate that for sure.
Yeah. Definitely a step in the right direction.
Oh, and one more thing. I mean, I think, them establishing the Freedom of Information Act, that is a very progressive move. So I think just having that, and that actually, so the Freedom of Information Act is something that enables, requests for information from public bodies. So it's really quite helpful. More than helpful, it is very enabling. It creates an enabling environment for journalists, but also for the people to get that kind of access to information. All of this is access to information, right?
Right. Yeah. I agree. We've talked about, the non-interference in editorial sort of like matters, transparent communication among journalists and the external stakeholders, and the free access to information. But we also want to end the discussion just now. I promise you this is the last one.
Sure.
It's like, at least, within this year alone, because we're about to conclude the year, right?
Yep.
CIJ, would you be able to list out at least the top things that has progressed us as Malaysian press within this region alone? Like, where have we propelled compared to the year before?
Ooh, good question. Compared
to 5 years before, a decade ago.
I mean, in terms of press freedom, again, you would really have to, kudos to the government and to the Ministry of Comms and also to the Legal Affairs Division for both, as I mentioned, the Media Council and also the Freedom of Information Act being passed or it's about to be passed, this bill. I think that's really, really a step in the right direction. To show that, the Madani government is indeed Madani. And, I think stuff like this, stuff that promotes transparency, the willingness of the government to kind of work in tandem with all the people who are being affected, actually, by the environments created from so long ago, right? Even from the colonial era. I think that's a really, really great step in the right direction.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, Loraine from the Centre. for Independent Journalism Malaysia,
you.
CIJ Malaysia. We appreciate your insights.
No, likewise. Thank you for having me.
But before we wrap up, I do want to, zero in on another pressing issue concerning us today, our weather. How did you arrive here? Was it raining when you came?
Actually, wasn't. I'm shocked because the weather was terrible the last few days.
Well, forecast is saying that we'll be experiencing another heavy rainfall. I suppose when our audience watch this, probably you'll be experiencing a few, or probably not. I'm not too sure, but apparently there are talks saying that a tropical storm has developed in the Straits of Malacca and heading towards Philippines. And
time ever,
it's the
right,
first time ever, because it's never been. This sort of scale, the sort of storm has never entered, or at least started from the equator. What does that say about our climate sort of situation at the moment?
Wait. Normally, you know what, a lot of people argue about climate change, and this is a very clear indication that it's happening.
And Southeast Asia right now is actually experiencing this and being hit really hard, because I think about a couple of days ago I saw the Civil Defense Association in Thailand and some NGOs in Thailand actually calling out for help because they're just over capacity. They can't accommodate the amount of people requiring evacuation. We still have Malaysians stranded in Hatyai.
In Hatyai, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been crazy because over here in Malaysia as well, we've been having floods, trees falling, and the usual thing that happens in every monsoon. I don't know why we have it every year, and yet we feel so unprepared every time it happens.
Yeah,
it feels like as though it's happening. We are flooding.
Betul. True.
I mean.
True. What worries me the most is the unpredictability of things here. And because of this, that's why we actually spoke with Dr. Khamarrul Azahari Razak, who is the Senior Research Fellow at the Disaster Preparedness and Prevention Centre of Malaysia. He shared some really interesting insights. Let's have a look.
Current scenario, especially when it comes to the weather climate, is very unpredictable, and Malaysia itself is experiencing storms with intensity far beyond historical norms. And not just here in Malaysia, particularly within the region itself, right? We're experiencing this continuous rainfall. Sometimes it's heavy, sometimes it's just drizzling. It's really unpredictable. But also recently, there are talks about a never before sort of tropical storm that has developed in the Straits of Malacca and heading towards east, right? To the east of the region, towards Philippines. This is quite an unprecedented sort of case because it has never happened in the equator. Do you know anything about it, and what does this entail for us?
There are a series of events in the past. It's not the first, and it's not rather new in the Malaysian context. Let me recall in December 1996, we have a typhoon Gray, so-called, and it killed more than 300 people in Sabah. In a single tropical depression, it triggered a lot of debris flow, landslides, and also flooding. You know, that's the deadliest storms ever recorded in the Malaysian's history. Then, if I quickly jump from Typhoon Gray, we have also another typhoons, back-to-back typhoon within 2 months in Penang. It hit our Penang Island in 2017. This typhoon Doksuri, if you remember, 1/3 of the cities was also inundated. I believe that you heard about this Typhoon Rai in 2021 during monsoon in December 2021. There was a tail of the typhoons. It was supposed to be landed in East Coast, but it passed over our main range, and it triggered a lot of damaging to the cities, especially in Selangor, in Pahang, and also Negeri Sembilan. I think the new predicted typhoons or cyclones was in the region this year. I think the Philippines has experienced many typhoons ever recorded in the single season. And last year, when I was in Taiwan, in the single month in November, they were hit by 2 typhoons. So given the fact that what we have been discussing at the regional level is not new, that's what they have been facing every year. But something new to the context of Malaysian environment is the impact. It has to be quantified enough to understand locally, especially the directions and the scale at the local level. I think that's something new, given the fact that our Malaysian Meteorological Office and few more government agencies have been working very hard to understand the localized climate change impact.
When you talk about typhoons, right, and then especially when it comes to this scale, is there a sort of behavioral pattern that we should be looking into so that we can actually prepare ourselves if, let's say, within the next month it happens again? Or is it too soon for us to identify because it's a different sort of locality also, even if it's within the region?
I think the storm, tropical storm Senya, it has many names basically throughout the countries, throughout the region. So this time around, people were talking about Senya. But we have to understand the characteristic of tropical storm or cyclones or people referring to typhoons in some sense. It brings a lot of water to the area within a short period of time. So can you imagine that our country with 55% of our land are basically forested land? So if it is landed in the forested area, we have seen that our mountains, our water catchment couldn't cope with a number of water landed at the same time in the short time. So coming back to 18 December 2021, what was actually happening, it landed, it fall in the mountain range, and the mountains, the hill slopes couldn't cope the amount of water substantially. So it released a lot of sediments to the river system. And keep in mind that December is still monsoon. So I think now we are talking about 27th of November. Last year on this day, Kelantan has experienced huge disaster in the single night. 26th of November, it was reported more than 500 people in the evacuation center, but 27th of November 2024, it was reported close to 55,000 people evacuates from their homes to evacuation center. So my worry is not the forecasting, nowcasting, predicting where these typhoons or tropical storm is. My little worry is the impact locally. What best our local government, local council ready to cope with substantial impact. So 18th of December 2021, we received 2 days before about the warning by meteorological office about this typhoon Rai, and no one actually dared to predict that the warning was released by Met Malaysia at 5:55 in the morning, 16th of December, but 17 evening and 18 we were badly hit. Selangor was almost collapsed at that time. 7 or 8 district suffering. It's not only Selangor, but also they shared the same impact in Negeri Sembilan and Pahang. So can you imagine the disaster management here in Malaysia is based on tier from district to the state and to the national level. So we have to really understand the impact quickly so that we can better prepare or even forecast the substantial economic losses in that particular area.
We are talking about the rainfall intensity and the impact on whether or not our local governments are able to accommodate this sort of like I suppose scale of natural disasters, right? But should we start looking like should we start looking at European cities like Amsterdam that shifted from fighting water to making room for water, and what would that look like if we apply that particular model here, right? We have this concept of like sponge city, but are we even able to develop that sort of like environment within the natural sort of makeup that we have today?
Well, of course, having a resilient city is a dream. Preparing an area to cope with a future impact like these typhoon induced that bring a lot of water to the region and trigger a series of major flooding and landsliding. It's a good model indeed, but within the context of tropical region, I think we can also look into our neighbors, say for example the Philippines. They have been preparing a lot. They have been investing a lot. So there are a few cities in the region, especially in Southeast Asia, can be also our benchmarking model. But given the fact that you mentioned about making rooms for water, yes, I studied in Netherlands. I've been living in Europe for 5 years. I know how important for their governments to invest earlier, so to increase a number of budgeting to build this gigantic infrastructure, investing into structural mitigation way before they were hit. So coming back to our context, some of our city are aging. 50 years old, 100 years old, our drainage are no longer coped with the impact of the climate change. It has to be rejuvenated. It's not just about selecting the model, but most important one is to understand about current risks and also future climatic impact. Then we can make a new strategy or model how to make our city more resilient. It's not just about learning from the past, but also preparing for the future worse. So I trust that there are many more model. You did mention about sponge city. Yes, there are a few area in Malaysia can be also adapted this concept already. Is pretty much a concept, but we have to allow rivers or waters to find their ways. So the concept of adapting the extreme weather event is the key in any sponge city like resilient city so this Dutch model or a few more international model work with understanding the nature.
We were to introduce these interventions, right, irrespective of if it's a sponge city sort of concept or is like a make more for water sort of concept, but how do we measure the success? Is it through the balancing of the population? Is it through the repairing or updating of the irrigation system, the piping system, the sewage system? Macam mana?
Yeah, there are many ways to measure. One of them, in fact, we did, as I mentioned at the beginning, we have completed one study funded, led by Plan Malaysia. We measure the resiliency level of our city. So through Climate Disaster Resilience Index, CDRI, we have been measuring many cities in Malaysia. Out of 125 over 5 major components, as I mentioned, economic component play major roles. That's the lowest mark compared to physical, social, institutional, environment, but economic component contributes dramatically into the process of reducing a certain vulnerability at the local level, but also bringing other factors to the region. That's number one. Number two, we can also measure through a number of investments. Well, throughout the countries, I think every year we heard about budgeting, we heard about yearly budget, RMK. So let's have a look how much basically the government put a budget or put a number of allocated certain budget for disaster prevention, not mitigation, not post disaster. I'm talking about before the event, So this one way to measure the commitments of the governments or the countries towards to the global agenda, so-called Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction 2015-2030. They are measuring how much basically you are committed to the pre-disaster phases instead of investing or putting money after the disaster.
Just
Yes.
curious, where are we at with that? Yeah.
Yeah. So we have submitted our midterm review reports to United Nations Office for Disaster Reduction. Well, despite that, there are increasing trend of budget yearly, moving from RMK 12 to RMK 13, but still not enough. Given the fact that the number of disasters are also increasing. So we have to increase the percentage yearly and also this development plan every 5 years. Amalina?
Now, one of the key ideas he highlighted for us to overcome this, not just within the country alone, but in the region, is urban planning and urban planning that works with water. If we zero in on how Europe handles it, right? But just beyond that, because we can't just be talking about having to build a sponge city without that that absorbs our over excessive sort of rainfall, but without having to ensure that the livability of the area is not taken care of.
Yeah, because it's not just about infrastructure. Here we're talking about, early warning systems, coordinated disaster response agencies, and community awareness campaigns are equally important. The idea is to create a multi-layered approach so floods don't just catch. I mean, I just said it every time. We seem to be surprised when floods occur. When it's been like a yearly thing now. But what? We need to create this approach that floods and disasters like this don't catch people off guard.
Yeah, but what I am concerned, if suddenly we get snow, then I'm like, oh my God.
I mean, it's Christmas, snow, maybe, but okay, yeah, that's rather extreme, and I would be worried. I mean, after building a snowman and all that, but I will be worried. Storms like this, they remind us that climate patterns are changing.
Yes, and the action and the time to take accountability and to, drive change is now, actually. So with that, I would like to remind our audience to, and people on set here, to stay safe, stay alert, and plan your travels right.
Bring your umbrellas.
But maybe umbrella can't help you lah. You have to actually check the rising water levels also,
Stay on high ground, people. Stay on high ground.
And with that, we've come to the end of the show. Again, I'd like to thank our guests for our earlier segment, Cynthia Loraine from CIJ. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Elena, for being my co-host today.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our audience, we do appreciate your time with us, for staying true every single week. If you do like this episode, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to also turn on the notification bell if you haven't already. You'll not only get NSC Beyond the Headlines update, other NSC Online's news reports will be delivered to you. Now, follow us on our socials. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Threads, as well as TikTok. My name is Amalina Kamal, and I'll see you next week.